Hello. Welcome to the second annual Ron Finegold Memorial. My dad taught me chess, and my brother, and he died 5 years ago in 2014. He was a master, and he was born in 1937. He probably played his first tournament around 1955, after he'd already played for a long time, and his first rating was over 1900. Unlike me, my first rating was 901, and 3 years later I was 1115, so I didn't improve quickly. And then eventually I became reasonable. At his peak, my dad was 2280 USCF in the 1960s, which with inflation is about 3,700 today. Yeah, so he was much better than Stockfish, actually. And he was 35th in the country at his peak. He was one of the top 5 players in the Midwest. This is a picture taken before cameras existed. That's my dad right there, if you see the mouse. And actually, confusing the audience, this guy here has been to the chess center, and when I go to Michigan, he was a good friend of my dad's, and now I hang out with him sometimes. His name's Wesley Berger. He played a blitz tournament here, and the truth hurts. Man. That is Wes. You can believe that. Yeah, and this picture was taken, I think, in 1958 at some tournament. Yeah. And then that's my mom and dad on their 50th wedding anniversary, and my dad died about 3 months later. This is his game with Fisher, which I lecture about a lot, which we're not going to do today. This is a picture of my dad's last tournament game. That's Christopher Shen. He was about 2,000 and change. Now he's about 2,300. He was 9 years old when he was 2,000. And I think he's already retiring because he's 12 or 13. That game went 6 hours and 15 minutes, and my dad won. And that was his last tournament game ever. And he was 77 years old. Yeah. And he couldn't walk too good, but he played chess okay. This is the game I'm gonna show today for the 1992 U.S. Open, and this is an article I wrote for Chess Life Online. This is the picture of you already saw of the last game he played. Now, last year we had this tournament. It was the first Ron Finegold Memorial. This is the second. And Davide Anastasio, who's playing in this tournament and played last year, wrote an article for Chess Life, and that's the Chess Center. This is from chessbase.com last year. So this is the article he wrote. So you see who won last year, Elshan. And if I remember correctly, and I don't, I think Elshan played Zapata in the last round. So having the two grandmasters play in the last round was pretty cool, and Elshan won. So they actually played a decisive game. And then there's my dad's game with Fisher, of course.
Would you have time to go over that one as well?
Well, not today. I go over that every lecture, so we're not going to do that today.
Oh, I haven't seen it.
Yeah. Yeah, and there's Spencer's game with Jeff Burdett. There you go. Yeah. Yeah. And then David Vest, Harry Lee. Very suspicious. So my dad taught me and my brother to play chess when we were very young. It took us to a lot of chess tournaments. And there were a lot of nights when I was pretty young, and we'd have to wait. So chess a long time ago didn't have sudden death time controls, which all tournaments do now. So what happened was you would play something like 40 moves in 2 hours, and then at move 40, you would get another hour, and then at move 60, you would get another hour, etc. And there was no sudden death. They didn't have that. So they did two things. One is they played forever, and the other was they would adjourn the game, and they would finish it later. And I could tell you lots of stories about that, because I like stories. I'll just tell you a couple. My dad was known to play the longest games of the round. So when I was 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 years old, I was getting home a lot at 2, 3 in the morning because we're playing in a chess tournament. My game would end in an hour, and his game would end in 7 hours. And once, before I was born, my dad was in Canada at a tournament, and there was a guy who was slower than my dad named Geza Fuster. He was an IM. He was a very low-rated IM. Anyway, his games never ended. And he was playing a game that started about 6 or 7 o'clock, and my dad got tired at midnight. He was watching, his game had ended. My dad went to bed, and my dad woke up about 6:30, and went down to the tournament room, and the game hadn't ended yet. Yeah. And so I'll tell you the story of when my dad killed a man. It's a good story. 1979, the Michigan Open, which is the state championship, just like the Georgia, whatever they call it here, Georgia Open, I don't know, had the record at 259 players. That was the most they've ever had. And it was in one section. So you know how we have 4 sections here? That was in one section. So it was 7 rounds. Now, there were 2 rounds a day on this particular day, and they were at 10 a.m. and I think 6 p.m. And my dad was playing a guy named Letterman, who was 39 years old, from out of state, and he was about 1750, and my dad was 2200. That game didn't end, so they adjourned the game so the next round could start. And what they would do is, there's 2 ways you can do it. You can guess the results and then make pairings. Another thing that they did, which sounds sort of weird, is they would take the best possible result for both players and pair them like that. So they're like, well, he's up a pawn, so we'll pair him as a win, his opponent as a draw for pairings. Ugh. Okay, anyway, so that game was adjourned, even though they'd played like 7.5 hours. Then, the next pairing for Letterman was against Tom Mazachowski, who's also 2200, and that game never ended. In fact, I think they're still playing. And at some point, my dad went to the director and said, can I go home? And they were like, no, you have to wait for this game to end, and then you're going to play your adjourned game before like the next round starts. And that game ended, 3 in the morning. And we were asleep in the car, me and my brother and my mom. And when the game ended, the director said he was tired. Why don't you just go home? And my dad didn't like that because he was waiting like 4 hours for the game to end. And he's like, no. And they made the guy play the adjourned game. And that game ended at 7:30 in the morning. So the guy in question played from 10 a.m. to 7:30 a.m. with about a half-hour break. Okay? The guy who was 1750 drew both games, even though he was playing 2200. And then Thursday, so this is on Sunday, Thursday the guy died. Yeah, truth hurts. So chess is hard. He's actually flying somewhere. So yeah, that's the story of how my dad killed a man. Although actually, I guess the other guy had something to do with it.
The director.
The director helped, yeah. And I remember, they don't do that now. However, I played a tournament in 2005. It was 2005. And my first game went 6 hours. Then there was a 10-minute break, and my second game went 6 hours. And I drew both games. Yeah, I remember that. That's the craziest story I have in that kind of thing. I did have a game that went 3 days. We adjourned it like 3 times. I lost that game. Anyway, my dad had a lot of stories like that because without sudden death and the fact that his games never ended. We make fun of Karen because Karen always has the last game, but it's sudden death, so her games are 3 hours. But my dad's games were 7 hours, 8 hours, 9 hours, yeah. And he was known for that. And he won the state championship, and he was one of the top 5 or 10 players in Michigan for like 35 years. And my brother and I went to a lot of tournaments. My brother's been here a couple times. He won a blitz tournament, and his peak was about 2,300. Spencer's peak was, 2260-ish?
2239.
2239. My peak is 2663. So our family's pretty good at chess. Yeah, and then my daughter, 101. But she's better than that. She's at least 102 strength. at least. Yeah. Yeah. And my mom hates chess, man. She knows how to play, but she doesn't like it. Anyway, we were in a chess family, and a lot of the players in Michigan, where I'm from, who got good at chess, they came to our house and played blitz with my dad when they weren't very good, and eventually they got very good. One example was Dexter Thompson, whose peak rating was 2396. And when he was a kid, he would come to our house and play blitz with my dad, and they would analyze, and we would feed him. And one time he came over, and he was talking to my mom, and he said, "Does Morphy still play chess?" Now, I mean, I'm old, but I ain't that old. And my mom said, "No, he's been dead for like 100 years." And he went, "Oh." This actually explains why Dexter Thompson sacks all his pieces every opening. I think he thought Morphy was like a current player. He tried to play like him, but that's very suspicious. Yeah. Okay, now in 1992, as you all know, the U.S. Open was in Detroit, Michigan. Or was it technically Dearborn? It was technically Dearborn. It was across the street from Detroit.
We all knew that.
Yeah, technically. And, of course, we all played because we lived like 10 miles from the tournament. And many years ago, let me find the game. It's here. Many years ago, a kid from, I believe, the Ukraine moved to Michigan with his family, and they didn't have any money or a car or anything. And my dad would go to his house and pick him up, take him to tournaments. And he later played in the U.S. Junior Championship, and he was 2,500 USCF. And we were like big rivals in Michigan in the 90s. And I guess just the 90s. And then he quit chess and changed his name. So you can see up here, it says Eric Torman, but his name is Vadim Semekman, so it's the same person. And he was probably like 2,200 strength when he moved to Michigan when he was a kid, and then he got to 2,500. I see him like once every 3 or 4 years now. So my dad played him in the U.S. Open, and my dad won. I think that's my dad's best game, so we're going to look at that. And also, in that tournament, my dad played John Fedorowicz, who's a very famous American grandmaster, even older than me, if that's possible.
New York Open, 1989.
What about it?
He won it.
Oh, yeah, that's right. Yeah, very suspicious. Okay, I mean, Eric Lobron won the New York Open, too, so that's, man, harsh. Okay, and my dad lost to Fedorowicz, and the game was put in the New York Times in the Robert Burns column, except they put that I lost the game. And I wrote to them and said, no, that was my dad, but they never corrected it because, fake news and such. That was an early example of that. Okay, very early, yeah. Okay, and then, but unfortunately, Trump put out an article saying that it was me. So, terrible, man, harsh. Okay, I still voted for him. All right, so, yeah, and you believe that. Okay, so my dad, unlike a lot of people, made up his own stuff. So if it's theory, it wasn't my dad's game. And he didn't do that. He just made up stuff. And then my dad would start thinking right away. So it could be move 3, and he was thinking a long time because it wasn't theory. So on move 1 with either color, he didn't know what my dad was going to do, and he didn't know either. Okay, he just liked to play interesting chess. So my dad has the white pieces, and Eric played the King's Indian. And my dad mixed 2 systems, confusing his opponent. Normally, if you play the move e4, which is what I play, then the bishop usually goes to e2, sometimes to d3. Or you could fianchetto your bishop, play bishop g2. But my dad did both, so he confused his opponent. So he played e4, which is what I play, and they played g3. So I'm already confused. It's not bad, it's just my dad played his own way. My dad liked to fianchetto his bishops. I did notice that. Yeah, he liked to do that. Okay, so he fianchettoed his bishop, and he has a nice center. C6 is a little bit of a weird move. I wouldn't do that. Okay, h3. And the point of h3 is white's going to play bishop e3, and we're avoiding knight g4. And that's what happened. Okay. Well, I like white. White has a nice center. White's pretty well developed. Neither one of black's bishops is very good. I'm not a big fan of knight a6. Now, in this position, if white never plays d5, and he never did, then black's then on a6 doesn't make a lot of sense. if white does play d5, at least black can put his knight somewhere. So Eric took, and again, my dad played his own way. So if I was playing a blitz game, I would play knight takes d4 without thinking. Thinking's not my strong suit. But he played bishop takes d4, which also reasonable, I guess. And problem with black's position in this kind of opening is he's very passive. White has 2 pawns on the 4th rank, and black has nothing on the 4th rank. And one of the moves black wants to play when he plays c6 is to play d5, and that's not going to happen. White has lots of stuff defending d5. So if c5 is very weakening, giving away the d5 square, weakening the d6 pawn, moving this pawn doesn't make a lot of sense. You can't move the a pawn, you can't move the f pawn, you don't want to move these pawns. So it's hard for black to do anything really. Black is sort of passive. So basically what black does is he waits for white to overextend, and then black counterattacks. Okay? As Giroux would say, Joe Frazier style, right? Exactly. I mean, you got to play along like Evelyn does. Come on. Okay. And actually, like some of that did happen. So, okay, knight c5, obviously. Get that knight good. Queen c2, defending the e pawn some more. Always defend the e pawn more. Knight e6. I don't like knight e6. Knight e6 blocks 2 of black's pieces. We got our bishop on this diagonal. We got our queen putting pressure on e4. And knight e6 blocks both of them. So I don't like that move. Since black's not going to play f5, I'm guessing he should play rook e8 at some point and put more pressure on e4. But instead he blocked his pressure on e4. So I don't know about that. Okay, then he retreated again. And this way he opens up this bishop. And his knights have lots of nice squares in theory. But it's very passive. Black's pieces are very far back. Black's not playing c5. Black's not playing d5. Black's not playing f5. And a lot of people, when they see this pawn structure for white, they call it the Marazzi bind, because you're just making sure that black can't move forward. And if anything, my dad was very patient, because most of his games were several hours. And that's the problem with a lot of people today, is they're not patient. So when they have sort of a bind or a strong advantage, they don't maintain it, they just give it up right away. My dad didn't do that. So if my dad had like forced mate in 2, he might not do it, but if he was strangling you, he would continue strangling you. Okay, sort of like Homer. Okay, b3, which is unnecessary, but it's just solid and boring, and defending the c pawn, which wasn't defended. Not even attacked yet, we attack soon. Knight c5, rook d1. This pawn is weak on d6. Knight f6. Now everybody's confused because they don't know which knight is which. Now for some reason, black played here, 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 back, and then he played here, here, and back. So I'm not sure about that technique. That seems like black's not doing anything. Okay, bishop f4. Finally a move you guys understand. That attacks the d6 pawn. No, it does really. Okay, rook d8. Rook e1, knight goes back to e6, bishop c1, always retreat. The bishop's good on c1 because it controls this diagonal. Maybe he'll play bishop a3, and maybe he'll play bishop to b2. And the bishop on d2 or e3 would block one of the rooks, and obviously on f4 or g5, black can take it. So I like bishop c1. Queen c7, and f4, finally. White's using his extra kingside pawn and gaining space. Knight h5 is a terrible move, I think. And yeah, black just played planlessly this game, even though it's pretty high rated. And f5. So very slowly, white's improving his position, and black is just moving around doing nothing. That's one of the problems with this variation. And this is why the Finegold variation for white with g3 bishop g2 is a favorite of somebody like Magnus Carlsen, Mikhail Botvinnik, because it's like a slow strangulation. white gains space, black can't do very much, and eventually black gets overrun very slowly, which is what happened in this game, until later when it didn't happen. Knight c5 again, e5, and now the queen is overworked and or overloaded. Now black is not a grandmaster, so I would say overworked. The grandmaster probably overloaded. No, nothing? Well, you, Raj. Yeah? No? Damn. Okay. Nobody gets my drunk jokes. So the queen here is defending the rook and the knight. So if we take this pawn, we could take the rook and then take the knight. Because the queen can't, yeah. Okay, so e5 looks pretty good. Knight e8, always retreat. e6. My dad stopped the clock and thought he had won, and they were like, "Sir, this is not Connect 4." So then it didn't work. Yeah. Also, he had tic-tac-toe earlier. So obviously, black's pieces, for the most part, are over here, so that's a good time to attack white's king. In a lot of king's Indians, white's king gets attacked, but not this one. Okay, he takes this, takes the other way. Now the queen looks really good on c2. Yeah, and he's just getting totally overrun. The game should end very soon. Should. All right, here comes white. There we go. And as soon as the game should end, it did not. Okay, rook f7 is a brilliant move. And I think if two super GMs were playing, black would resign now. But my dad missed a nice win. We'll see if you guys in the audience can get it. So black played queen e8, and here my dad blundered, still winning, but he actually can win in one move. That's better than winning in 35 more moves. Or maybe it's not, because he made him suffer. So, Archer with the right answer. Then queen takes h5. What? Sorry?
Archer resigns?
Archer resigns? All right. I was resigning before you were born.
Take the bishop. Take the bishop, queen takes queen, and then rook to g8.
Okay, then bishop takes g8.
Oh, I didn't see the bishop.
Didn't see it's right there.
I see it. I see it now.
Yeah. You with the right answer.
Maybe rook takes g7,
Yeah, maybe.
and then queen takes h5, and then bishop takes e5.
Man, if we took all three of the answers and mixed them, we get the actual right answer.
Queen h3 in that variation.
Sorry?
Queen h3
Yeah.
in that variation.
Oops.
Just take all the answers that were given and mix them, and you have the right answer. If my dad was alive today, he wouldn't feel so bad for missing this, since a whole class of people can't find it. All right, it's 1,000% Doric's right, because he's really raising his hand now. He's really raising his hand.
Rook takes f8, bishop takes f8, rook takes f8, queen takes f8, bishop takes e5.
Partial credit. After rook takes f8, I guess I play queen takes f8. Right?
Okay.
Otherwise, you're right. Yeah. Do you know Spencer?
I thought it was rook f8.
Oh, no, you guys had the right answer, but you, instead of playing mate in one, you didn't. Usually you should play mate in one when you have it. If you're taking notes, play mate in one. You guys actually have the right answer and didn't play mate in one. Suspicious class.
Made one and one variation.
Yeah. Archer.
Rook takes f8, bishop takes f8.
Right, he already said that. You can't say the same thing he did. After rook f8, black plays queen f8.
Wait.
You with the wrong answer. I want to save time. Yeah. All right. Well, you can't see mate in one, so I have to help you. Rook g7, which everybody said. Queen h5. Rook g8, which Jill said. And then after here, we play mate. Checkmate. After bishop takes g8, Jill's like, oh, I didn't see bishop take g8. Oh, well. Yeah. Then white's better. Because it's mate. Yeah. And then the engine, after rook g7, plays bishop f7 or something. Kidding me? And you with your engines. Obviously, resigns is better. Who's making these engines nowadays? Yeah. So rook g7, the game would have ended. It would have ended like this.
They make themselves now.
That's how it would have ended. That would have been good. And my dad told me afterwards he wants to just say that that's how the game ended and then get rid of the rest of the game. That's how I won. That would have been his best game ever because the guy was several hundred points higher rated, and then and then he beat him like the famous game. I don't know, Finegold versus Aaron. Right, Spence?
Yeah.
That's your game. Yeah, played yesterday.
Right.
Yeah, there you go. All right. You guys all know Spencer beat Deepak yesterday. Okay. You all know that.
That's on video reference.
That's right. I got it on my phone. Yeah. Okay. Anyway, my dad didn't see that like you didn't, so that's good. So, also in Michigan, I was playing, what's his first name? Alexander Lenderman. He doesn't spell Alexander correctly, but we'll teach him. And I had some position, and I said, should I go here or here? And I couldn't decide. I made one of the moves. And then I won somehow. When the game ended, I turned my engine on, and it said the other move, which I almost made, loses a piece for nothing immediately. And then I would have resigned. So I was like, oh, good, I didn't make that move. So, I mean, here, he saw rook g7, but didn't see bishop e5 mate. So sometimes, you can get lucky in chess because you don't see something, and then, it turns out you were right. Okay, so bishop g6, that's not best. And my dad's still winning, but they're in time trouble because my dad's always in time trouble. And eventually he threw away the win, even though he's winning. Rook takes. And this shouldn't be any problem at all. Here my dad has a bishop, a knight, and a pawn for a rook, and the rook's on a8, and black's getting checkmated, and so forth. So I'm guessing if I turn the engine on, it's like plus 1,000,000. However, later in the game, my dad was losing. So chess is hard. Okay, taking everything. Yeah, taking all those pawns doesn't seem relevant to checkmating black's king. Although it did work out later. And again, I think time trouble ended at move 40. Although maybe not. It might have been 50 and 2.5. They used to have strange time controls a long time ago. Yeah. One of the advantages my dad has is all of his games were many, many hours, and his opponents usually, that wasn't the case. So he was more used to that. And as you all know, when you play in a slow tournament like this one, there's 2 rounds a day or 3 rounds a day. Unless there's more. In the US Open, although they changed it a little bit, it's 1 round a day. So that's good for my dad, because my dad likes to play 7-hour games. So 1 round a day is his specialty. And the game starts at 7 o'clock at night, and the idea is to let local people go to work and then go play in the tournament. That's the idea. So there's usually a lot of locals at the US Open, because they get to work and then go play their round. Okay, so my dad sort of gave up on the king. His queen was attacked, he had to move it somewhere. And eventually the computer said black was better. Knight takes d4. My dad was an uncompromising player. Yeah. And now black has no pawns. There's a lot of pieces on the board. You don't see that very often. And when you look at my dad's games, you often say, you don't see that very often. There's a lot of weird stuff happening in my dad's games. He played a very unusual style for somebody with a high rating. Okay, check. He blocked the check, confusing the audience. Yeah. That move seems very odd.
And how does Queen E5 not win after that?
Yeah, maybe the game ended now. Oh yeah, that's right. My dad blundered here. Yeah. Still winning, but yeah, obviously Queen E5 is winning. Why would Vadim play Knight E5? What? What kind of move is that?
The King H7.
Right, yeah, obviously.
Isn't it Ben?
Isn't weapon the knight on E5? Yeah. Yeah, Knight E5 is the worst I ever saw. Yeah. You get tired when you've been playing for 6 hours. Yeah. Yeah, this game doesn't make a lot of sense. And then after King H6, he resigned before my dad could move. That's a good idea.
Yeah,
Well, yeah, this is plus 1,000. Yeah. By the way, if you know the famous game, at least Spencer does, Karpov-Topalov, Linares, right? And the final position, if I remember correctly, Spencer will correct me, it was queen, bishop, and 4 versus queen and rook.
He had 5 pawns.
It was 5?
Yeah.
Damn. But he had 0 pawns, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, black had this. King, queen, and rook. And Karpov had a queen, bishop, and 5 pawns. That's not good for Topalov. Yeah. It was like this. It's very similar. Yeah, almost the same material. Yeah. And in that game, if you played over that game and analyzed it, you would think, well, white was easily the better player. White got an opening advantage. Black moved his knights around for no reason and got pushed back. White had forced mate and didn't do it, but still was up 1,000 pieces. But actually, black was much higher rated than white. So that's a strange, normally lower rated player beats a higher rated player, higher player like hangs a queen or something. Even then it's 50-50. But a lot of times when my dad played higher rated players, he would win. And when he played lower rated players, my dad would win in 7 hours against somebody like 1,600. And I'm like, well, why take you so long to beat this guy? So my dad's games just went a long time, and they were very strange. It was hard to analyze them because a lot of the moves you wouldn't look at, and a lot of what he did didn't change the position very much. He wasn't like, I have mate in 3, or I have some trick that wins a piece. Just sort of weird position where his opponents were confused. And when I teach chess in my private lessons, I actually talk about this a lot. Some people play a very straightforward fashion. You understand what they're doing, and they play better than you. We call those people Karpov and Leko and Petrosian, usually, but not always, Smyslov. Then there are people where you don't understand what's happening, and then all of a sudden you resign, like Morozevich and Shirov and Mikhail Tal and Shabalov. And people who play very strange, unusual chess, confusing the audience, there's a lot more mistakes in those games. And that's one of the reasons the engine is pretty good. The engine doesn't care about that. So the engine doesn't say, this position's weird, now I'm going to play badly. The engine's like, oh, mate in 12. Yay. All right, and then we don't see mate in 12. Or you make a move that loses a piece to a trick nobody sees, and the engine sees it in half a second. So if you play really unusual, weird chess against an engine, you just lose really fast. And if you play really boring chess, like Magnus, then, he could draw the engine occasionally, unless Roger's here to shake his head. What? If he's white, he can do it?
Yeah.
Sometimes?
Probably force line to sack everything and get it.
Sack everything, yeah. Harsh. Not just normal chess, has to sack everything. Yeah. Perpetual, yeah. So, yeah, playing my dad was hard because it was hard to predict his moves. Now, I played my dad several times, and my brother, because, playing tournaments in Michigan, and we got paired a lot. So that's, what are you going to do? And at some point between ages 13 and 16, I got better than him. But before that, he was better than me, and he beat me, and I've beaten him, and my brother also. And in fact, one of my favorite pictures, which is actually in my house, is in the last round of the 1989 Motor City Open, which they still have. It's a Thanksgiving tournament. My dad is playing my brother on board 2 to see who ties for first with me. They both had 4.5 out of 5. I had 5 out of 5, and I had my usual quick draw. So I got first. And then whoever won that game tied for first with me, and my brother beat my dad in like 5 hours in some rook end game. Yeah, our family didn't play any quick draws. We play crazy. Okay, now I'll finish the lecture with a crazy story. In the Motor City Open, this haunts me. This is a weird story. In the Motor City Open, God, when was it? Let's see. I was probably 2,300, so it had to be 1985. So it had to be 85. It has to be. So 1985, I had 4 out of 5 in the Motor City Open, and my dad had 4.5 out of 5. And I was the highest rated 4 out of 5, and he was the lowest rated 4.5 out of 5, so we might get paired. Might. And I don't want to play my dad in the last round when he has half a point more than me, because that doesn't seem right. So I went to the director, and I said, hey, I'm going to go eat, because, eat like a grandmaster. And if you're going to pair me with my dad, don't do that. I withdraw, and then just make the pairings. And I withdraw. I said, if I'm not going to play my dad, I'll play the last round. And he said, okay. So I went to eat, I came back, I'm paired with my dad. And I was like, what? That's the only thing that couldn't have happened. So I went to the director, he's like, oh, I didn't understand.
That was hard.
Now, this is at 1985, so the children are confused, but we didn't have pairings on computers for obvious reasons. Okay, we did the pairings by hand, and there was 130 players. So when you made the pairings, you didn't change them because 130 players. So I said, well, I'm not going to play my dad. Like, take me out and repair like the. And they said no. And I said, but I just didn't play. Okay, I did a Richard DeCredico before Richard did it. Okay, at least Spencer got that. Okay. Is he the one? And then Karen gets it, and that's it.
I didn't hear it.
I said I did a Richard DeCredico. I refused to play. So I was like in the Skittles room playing Blitz, and people were like, why aren't you playing your dad? And I told them, they said, oh, it's too terrible director, horrible. I didn't want to beat my dad because then he wouldn't get first place. And I didn't want to lose for a lot of reasons. And I thought if I did lose, people would accuse me of losing on purpose. And then if I won, I would feel bad. So I should have, in retrospect, I should have withdrawn. And then I wouldn't get paired. Well, I still might have got paired with him. But I actually did get paired with somebody after I withdrew in Vegas, in their tournament. And that guy won a lot of money. And I said, I withdrew. And they said, oh, yeah, that's right. We forgot to take you out. And my opponent won like clear first under 2,400, won like $3,000. I withdrew and they forgot to take me out. They're like, oh, yeah, we forgot. Sorry. And I showed up like after the round ended, and my opponent won a lot of money. So withdrawing doesn't mean that you're out necessarily. You still got to play. Anyway, so my dad's like, just play. And I was like, no. And I was 15. So. And then and my dad tied for first. So yay, go my dad. I think he won $600, which in 85 is like what, 30 grand, 40 grand? Yeah, the kids don't know. Yeah. And to finish with one of my favorite Simpsons quotes in that ilk, Bart had to work for some person mowing their lawn and cleaning their lawn for like a week. And when he was done, he got paid like a quarter. And then Bart didn't like that. And Homer said, when I was a kid, a quarter was a lot of money. And he said, really? And Homer said, no. Okay. So, yeah, my dad was a very interesting chess player. He played tournament chess for about 40 years. He won his last tournament game in over 6 hours. And he always fought when he played. There was no quick draws in his games. There were no quick games at all. And he won dozens of tournaments. And his longest streak, at one point in the 1960s or 70s, he won 18 games in a row with no draws. And he was, playing good players. So he was a pretty good player. Of course, if you want to see the Fisher game that my dad lost in 1963, that's on every website, everywhere. It's also in a lot of books. And it's also a famous end game where my dad got in Zugzwang in a bishop ending. You can find it everywhere. And I guess next year I'll go back to lecturing on that. All right, and now the most important part of the lecture, ending it so I can make the pairings. All right, and we'll see you all next year, I hope. Okay. Throw money.